This conference will now be recorded.
So welcome to week 3 of effective copywriting. This week, the pedal kind of gets floored and when the road and everything gets crazy this week because you're going to actually start writing taglines. You're going to be revising your ads, and the research paper that's due in week 4 is open as of today. So my advice is always to get started on it sooner rather than later. So I'm going to go over all of that today. But first, I'm going to start with taglines because that's the first thing that you have up for a deadline this week. You're going to write 10 taglines and post them in the FSO platform by Friday at 11:59 p.m. with 10 rationales. So, what is a tagline? Well, according to George Felton, a tagline, or sometimes they're called slogans, and in England they called them cut lines, present the essence of the campaign or the essence of a brand or the company. So it's usually that little, those couple of words that sit next to a logo. That's a tagline. It is not a headline. A headline is something completely different. Those two terms are not interchangeable. So some examples of taglines that have shown the test of time. American Express used "Don't leave home without it" for many years, and occasionally they still do. The happiest place on earth was a Disney tagline for their theme parks. Time to make the donuts was a really successful campaign for Dunkin' Donuts back in the day when they only made donuts. Now they do everything, so they can't really use that baker anymore as their spokesperson. Magically delicious is Lucky Charms, and believe it or not, I remember that tagline from when I was a kid. That's how tried and true that and timeless that tagline for that cereal was. Must See TV was a tagline created by Brandon Tartikoff and his promotional group at NBC back in the 80s when they were putting together a lineup on Thursday nights that everybody talked about around the water cooler. So it became Must See TV on Thursday nights. And it's not just a job, it's an adventure. That's a tagline used by our armed forces. So, what George Felton says in our textbook, Advertising Concept and Copy, is that taglines are these little pieces of persuasion. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. Or these little chunks of language that people carry around in their head. So, if I say Nike, you might automatically think just do it because that's kind of one of those tried and true taglines. So you're going to be tasked with coming up with 10 taglines for your nonprofit organization. In the FSO platform is the explanation of the writing workshop that we're doing in the discussion board this week. And like I said, at the top of the hour, you have 10 taglines with 10 rationales due on Friday at 11:59 p.m. At the bottom of the assignment, there are some really good resources for your tagline writing. So use them to help you develop your taglines and also use them as support for your rationales that you're writing about each of your taglines. So when you're thinking about creating taglines for your nonprofit organization or maybe in the future a product or a service, you can think about elevating the product, the service, the nonprofit by focusing in on one of the benefits of your product, service, or nonprofit. Remember, the features are what everything has. It's the benefits that separate them from the competition. So you can think about maybe the strongest benefit that separates your animal charity from the next animal charity and build a tagline around that. So focusing in on differentiation, what is it that separates your nonprofit organization from the others in the same grouping or from the other nonprofits in general? Do a SWOT analysis, understanding what the strengths and weaknesses, the opportunities and threats are for your brand can also help develop that unique selling proposition, that USP, and you can focus in your tagline around the USP. You can also do something called lean it up against something. And the perfect example of this was from the 1990s when Oprah went on some tirade about beef and how beef is bad for you. And she's only going to eat chicken from now on because red meat is so bad. So pork was like, we can call ourselves the other white meat. So what they did was they leaned themselves up against the benefits of chicken and kind of worked on gaining an audience through that idea that theirs is the other white meat. So that's leaning it up against something. Creative writing techniques are always helpful. So focusing in on parallelism where the sentence elements are identical through grammatical form. And here with the Survivor tagline from that show that's been on forever, their tagline is outwit, outlast, outplay. So the parallelism in that tagline is first with the alliteration through each word starting with O. They also have that nice rhythm to it because each word is 2 syllables, so they have that syllabic rhythm of outwit, outlast, outplay. Plus, it also plays on this idea of the Trinity or things in threes. Human beings love things in sets of three. So coming up with a tagline in a set of three, think about like the 3 words that actually resonate throughout your brand, and that could be a good way to look at a tagline. Another creative writing technique is called opposition, and that's where you think of one of your benefits and then you think about the complete opposite. So Purdue Chicken used to do this back in the 70s with their original owner, Frank Purdue, who was this little skinny fella, and he'd get on TV and say, "It takes a tough man to make a tender chicken." So he was using the complete opposite because he didn't look like such a tough guy, but he did make really tender chicken. Metaphor or simile is using like or as or thinking of something in terms of something else. So Chevy does this with their line of pickup trucks, and they compared them to rocks, that their trucks are like a rock. So that's using a metaphor. So when you're thinking about creating taglines for your brand, you want to keep them short because the shorter the better, the more memorable. That's why Nike Just Do It is so classic because it's just 3 words. So I always say keeping it under 7 words is best. So try not to go over 7 words. The best way to test your tagline is to say the name of the company and then say the tagline and hear how those words play off each other. How does it sound? What is the rhythm like? It's really important that you hear the words, not just write the words. So practice all your taglines aloud. I always proofread everything aloud because that helps me find errors in grammar and spelling and typos and stuff. Just a tip. So another tip you want for taglines is if your company name is not descriptive of what you do, then your tagline should be. So for example, there's a nonprofit organization out there called Kaboom, and unless I told you it was a children's play charity, you might not know that from the name. So creating a tagline around it being a children's play charity would give the viewer, the reader, that insight into what the company is, and it might get the attention. So again, focusing in on the essence of the brand and having it resonate through your tagline. Once you develop a tagline and it gets approved by the client, then you want to use it on everything because consistency is key in any effective advertising campaign. You know, they're not just going to get it the first time you say it. So the more you say it, the more consistent you are with your reception at saying on the phone, to it being on the signage outside, to your advertising materials. Make sure it's consistent everywhere. So it should be unique to your business. So I always recommend doing a Google search because the last thing you want to do is come up with some cliche like consumer driven or friendly or new and improved. So you want to make sure that it's unique and you're avoiding those cliches. And it should be true because remember, it's the essence of your brand. So it should resonate with truthfulness. Now, here's a pet peeve from me. I think the words make a difference in terms of nonprofit organizations is so lame and tired and overused that it no longer means anything. I get it. You want to make a difference. Your nonprofit organization is doing all this work because you want to make a difference. It's even on the side of the Orange County Sheriff's cars here in Orlando. Make a difference. And it's in a really bad font, but that I'll save for another day. So make a difference. I don't want to see that on anybody's taglines because what this class is all about is it's about, you know, strengthening your writing muscles and pushing your creativity. So you might want to make a difference, but you want to figure out a new way of saying that. So I don't want to see any make a differences on any of your taglines. So some good resources for you. These are also listed on the platform. Taglineguru.com is a really great website, and there's all sorts of materials there that you can use to help you come up with taglines. Advertising Concept and Copy, your textbook, is also a valuable resource. He has a whole section on creating taglines. And then go back to your swipe file that you started building in week 1. Look at how the taglines might be used in the ads that you used for the Settle and Alric 15 catalog of needs and your headlines assignment. So if you're not contributing to your swipe file, I always recommend you do that. I just went and looked at a bunch of vintage ads today to add to my swipe file because I'm looking at something about how voice and tone operates over the decades. So I was doing some research. So whenever I find ads, I always right click them, I view the image, and then I download them and put them in my electronic swipe file. Okay, I'm going to talk about the campaign research paper for a minute. This is a paper about the campaign that you're making for your nonprofit organization. So it's starting with these testimonial ads that you handed in week 2 and that we're going to revise in week 3. Go over that in a minute. But the campaign research paper, it's open this week so that you can give yourself time to do some reading and some research and get yourself set up for success for week 4. You don't want to leave everything to the last minute. Why? Because good writing takes time, and first thought, best thought only worked for poet Allen Ginsberg. The rest of us have to revise and rewrite and rethink things and rephrase and all that good stuff. So a first draft of this paper isn't going to cut it. So you want to give yourself time to draft the paper and then revise the paper and proofread it and do it in perfect APA style. So with the paper, you're going to open with an introduction. You're going to talk about your nonprofit. You're going to talk about the problem statement. Remember, with nonprofit organizations, the problem that you're trying to solve most probably revolves around raising money or raising awareness. So that should be part of your problem statement. Then the last part of your introduction is the thesis statement. That's basically the backbone of your paper. It's what you're setting out to prove over the coming pages. So if you struggle with writing a thesis statement, there is a sample thesis statement in the platform that you can use to guide your thesis statement writing. Then the body of the paper, if you follow all these bullet points that are in the assignment in FSO, the paper's going to kind of write itself. So after you write the introduction about who the organization is and what the problem is, finishing with your thesis statement, then launch into the company's history. Who are they? How did they start? Who started them? Why did they start? Then talk about what differentiates your nonprofit organization from the competition. Now, this research you've already done because you looked at the competition in week 1 with the Settle and Alric 15 catalog of needs. So you understand who your competition is. Next, you're going to specify the target audience. Well, we just did that in week 2 with the target audience profiles assignment that I will get graded to you and back this week. But those personas are basically the research that you did for the campaign. So use those personas to talk about your target audience here. Then you're going to describe the voice and tone of the campaign. You know, how does that voice of the brand resonate through your ads? Remember, in week 1, we wrote a paper and did research on voice and tone. So that research is already done. Then the last thing you want to do is talk about why this project is important to the nonprofit. Why are you solving this problem? Again, it's probably tied to their mission statement, which is kind of the essence of their brand. So look at their mission statement and explain what they do and why they do it. Then the second half of the body of the paper is going to talk about the design decisions in terms of what you're deciding to do for the actual ad campaign. Now, you know you're doing testimonial magazine print ads because we've started working on those, and that's what the client basically asked you to do in the fake RFP that we talked about in week 1. So this nonprofit has asked you to come up with ideas for magazine print ads that use the power of the testimonial. But now that you're going to have this meeting with them and you've developed these ideas, what else can you suggest to them? So talk about the media plan and what else you can suggest to the client to do. For example, maybe your testimonial ads can turn into testimonial videos for their YouTube channel. Maybe the testimonials can be used as part of the social media campaign, using that same voice and tone that echoes the brand through their social media platform. So while you have their attention and you're making, your pitch for them to understand the concepts that you develop for their ad campaign, tell them how else the campaign can be used in what other media. So expand your media plan beyond the magazine print ads. You want to be specific, so you're talking about that target audience that you researched. Remember, certain target audience members ingest media differently than other target audience members. For example, an older audience is probably going to read your testimonial ads in magazines, but what about if you want to get the attention of a younger demographic? That's where you want to talk about a younger demographic and how they ingest media. That's through social and electronic media. Okay, then you're going to talk about what you actually designed in these testimonial ads. So you've been working on them, you've chosen images, you've written copy, you've chosen typography. Talk about what you designed and use design research to back up your claims. Now in the About section of FSO, if you click on About when you're logged into FSO, I have a ton of resources there for you, and one of them is actually resources for your research paper, so download that. We also want you to go to the library to find some sources. So do log into the library, get into those research databases. I like Academic Search Premier, because what you're going to do is you're going to look for sources that support your argument that you're making. And your argument is in your thesis statement. This is what this paper is about, and this is what it's going to prove. So these pieces of research that you get from the databases in the library are going to help support your claim. So you always want to ask this question in regards to the research that you're doing. Will this specific resource help answer my research question? And if you say yes, then you want to double check that each resource that you use has an authoritative source, that it's not just some anonymous thing you found on the internet, that the author itself is an expert in the field, the source is current and not something from like the 1950s. Does the article that you're using support its own information accurately? And what's really good, a good tip for you to remember is that if you find a really good piece of research in the library, go look at their works cited or their reference page, see what support they're using, and there's your little trail of breadcrumbs for you to find other pieces of research. You also want to make sure that each piece of research you use from the library is not an opinion piece, that it's has a balanced tone, and it's not just, spouting off a bunch of unsubstantiated claims. So it's really important that you, when you do your library search, one of the things you should check off is peer-reviewed sources only. That way, when you do your search, the peer-reviewed sources will come up. So you want to avoid questionable sources, and these usually come from your .com websites because they're usually trying to sell you something. That's why it's a .com, it's commercial. There might not be an author attached to it. There's quotes maybe with no citations. They're making these generalizations or unsubstantiated claims, and maybe it's old and out of date. So you want to stay away from the .coms. The one website you can use, especially in terms of the nonprofit's history, is the nonprofit's own website and their about page, because that's where you'll get all the factual information about the organization. So since this is a 5 to 7 page paper, you need 5 to 7 secondary sources. And like I said earlier, you already have done research on voice and tone. You've already done research on the competition. You've already done research on the target audience profiles. One of the pieces of research is the nonprofit organization's own website. So there's one. And then the Felton textbook is a really good place to cite a source. So I just named 5 right off the bat that you already have. We're just asking you to go to the library and find at least one more from the library. This paper that's due Sunday of week 4 is in APA style, like everything we do here. So make sure that your reference page is the last page of the paper. Don't just take the citation manager that you're using and copying and pasting it in, because it is not formatted correctly. It's a great place to start to keep track of everything, but then you must go in and format the reference page so that it is double spaced. Make sure that your sources are in alphabetical order. Remember, if they run more than one line, that the second and subsequent lines are indented and there is no extra space between the entries. Okay? Something you need to get in the habit of is not just plopping in a quote or starting a paragraph with a quote or ending a paragraph with a quote. So this is a really good way to expand your writing. When you have to write, 7 pages in an academic tone, a really good way is to take the research that you've done and use it properly. You want to introduce the quote using an action verb. There is a list like this under the About section of FSO. So when you introduce your source, you want to maybe talk about John Smith in the article, All Volkswagen Buses Are Not Created the Same, states, claims, asserts, reports. So use an action verb to describe what it is that he's going to actually say. Then give us the direct quote. Remember, it's got to be in quotation marks, followed by an in-text citation. Then you don't end it there. Then you have to take the next sentence and explain how that direct quote supports your argument that you're making. So every time you use a direct quote, you're basically putting 3 sentences into your research paper. So I'm saying you need 5 to 7 sources in your paper. So let's say that's 5 to 7 direct quotes. That's 15 to 21 sentences written just right there around your research by introducing the quote, giving the quote, and then explaining in your own words what the quote means and how it supports your argument. Okay, so again, the paper is due Friday. The taglines are due Friday at 11:59, and then you're going to come back on Sunday and do your reply posts. All that is explained in the FSO platform. With the taglines, I skipped this part. When you do your reply post, you want to reply to 3 of your classmates, and you want to make sure that you're picking 3 taglines of theirs that work, in your opinion, and give a strong rationale supporting the claim you're making as to why those taglines work. Then choose 3 that are not so strong and explain why they don't work. So you're going to do 3 classmates reply posts. You're going to reply to each of the 3 by stating the 3 of their taglines that work and the 3 that don't. And of course, you're developing strong rationales using the support that I gave you in the assignment with the PDFs that are attached. Okay. The research paper is due Sunday of week 4, but like I said, get started on it sooner rather than later. So once you're done with your tagline initial post and you've got your testimonial ad revisions done, start reading and researching for your paper. Go back and find all the sources that you used in the prior assignment and just create an outline based on the bullet points that I laid out for the research paper in the platform. Don't leave it to the last minute. Okay, so today, anybody who turned in ads got their feedback from me, and I approached these ads in a real world scenario. So as if I was the president of the nonprofit or the director of communications or the creative director running the campaign, I am looking at your ads and giving you feedback as the client would for themselves. So I'm going to show some examples of how this works. So this first ad was done by a student for Coalition to Stop Gun Violence. And I was like, okay. It's a woman in a really bad hat with a machine gun standing on a playground. I'm like, I don't understand. First of all, I can't get past the bad hat. So the client may say something crazy like that. There's something about the image or the typography that just doesn't sit with them right. So that's why it's really important that you develop strong rationales about your design decisions so you explain why. This student could not explain why the woman that he chose was in the really bad hat. He just thought she was being this presence on the playground that was going to make it safer for the children. Has it really come to this? I'm like, well, I don't think the messaging is correct because it's not actually resonating with the voice of the brand. The Coalition to Stop Gun Violence is there to give you community just support to help your playgrounds be safer. So let's think about getting rid of the woman in the really bad hat and thinking about who the person is who the Coalition to Stop Gun Violence is going to help. So he revised this ad to look like this. Now you see the mom sitting on her stoop and she can finally smile. Why? Because the Coalition to Stop Gun Violence gave her the resources she needed to make her playground safe. She can now let her kids go out and play and not worry about them. So this resonates with the mission of Coalition to Stop Gun Violence, and you can understand who the organization is through the point of view of this frequent user. Then the second ad in the campaign the student did was trying to use personification, which we talked about in weeks 1 and 2. Personification is when you give an inanimate object human-like qualities. So here the guns are supposedly speaking and they're like, "Can you tell who has a mental illness?" And I said to the student, "No, I cannot." First of all, I don't know why they're aiming at each other, and I'm not even sure who's speaking. So what are you trying to say? So what he was trying to say was that it was easier for people to get a gun than, like, say, a driver's license, and that they're not checking people with a history of mental illness when they register for guns. So I said, well, how can you do that through personification of the gun? How can I hear the sorrow and the regret come through the voice and tone of the gun? So this ad turned into this ad. What have I done? I'm the manifestation of their Second Amendment. I'm shrouded in irresponsibility. You know, yada, yada, yada. When will they learn I should be controlled? So taking an idea, and his first thought was to say, can you tell who has a mental illness? Or let's put a woman in a bad hat on a playground with an automatic rifle to make my playground safe. Sometimes those initial thoughts aren't as strong, but when you approach them with revision in mind and you actually focus in on what the mission of your nonprofit is and how that voice and tone operates through that nonprofit and how your spokesperson, in this case the mom or the gun, how they sound to resonate that mission of the nonprofit is really important. So when I've challenged you on things in your ads, like maybe there's not enough copy or maybe there's too much copy, I'm coming at it through the point of view of someone who, first of all, has walked in those shoes. I have been the one that has had multiple changes to designs that I've done. One time I actually went through 75 logo revisions for a TV station. I'm not kidding. We had actually gotten to the point, I think, half the way through where we actually made the sign for the lobby. The president came in, hated it, and made us start over. So 75 logos later, we finally had a final logo. So you have to get used to people critiquing your work, and the client is going to have some opinions. It's your responsibility as the professional to educate your client if they're going in the wrong direction, by saying something like, no, I cannot understand who has the mental illness because the ad copy isn't clear, sometimes helps the designer rethink the entire concept of the ad. The other thing we've talked about in the feedback, I challenged each of you to think about now doing these revisions as if they were going to the client for the final time to be signed off on to go to the publication. And what the client needs is a cohesively branded campaign. So here's an example of a cohesively branded campaign. You might remember Pasadena Humane Society. I used one of their ads in the Settle and Alric example in week 1. But they have a specific voice and tone. They have a way that their ads look. All of their print materials look like this. So they have their specific colors that are part of their brand, and all their ads have this consistent tone, look, and feel. Here's another example. This is from the local growers of sweet potatoes, and they came up with this campaign that was talking about the power of the sweet potato and how orange predicts the future and orange powers potential. And then the third one is orange builds bodies. So this is all based on the same idea of their product being really healthy for you. So they developed these 3 concepts and came up with this idea of orange being the thing that drives the campaign. See, they all have a cohesive look. The body copy sits in the same place, the call to action, the logos, everything kind of has that nice cohesively branded look to it. This is a campaign that a student did for City Harvest, and this was extra ads she decided to do when she was playing with them. She decided that a really cool campaign would talk about how even though the fruit or the food product doesn't look perfect, it's still perfectly nutritious. So using that educational power of fact, she went through and talked about how even though this orange doesn't look that good, it's perfectly nutritious, and that every year 40% of food grown in the US ends up in the garbage. So why not rethink this produce? And City Harvest is an organization that gets food donated to it from restaurants from food that they might not use that night. So they're the ones, trying to, educate people that this food is perfectly edible. And last, this was a fun campaign done by Seven Sun, a clothing company, and it's all about selling their clothing, but they wanted to give it this idea of throwback. So you have the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s here kind of represented through fashion. And again, the ads look the same. They might have different images, and the tone of each ad, though, does make that synergy with the image. So you see the 70s, you see the 80s, you see the 60s reflected in all these ads. And they have that cohesive look with the copy, the call to action, and the logos. So that's what we're asking you to do as you revise your ads. So let's talk about the deadlines again. The testimonial ads need to be revised. All 3 ads need to be revised according to the feedback that you got, along with a statement talking about the changes you made and why you made them. If you have a strong argument against any of the changes that I have suggested, please make that in your rationale and make sure your argument is well supported and we can talk about it. That is due Sunday of week 3. The campaign research paper is not due till Sunday of week 4, but like I said, 4 times, get started on it early. If it'll save you a lot of headaches in week 4. First thing up is the tagline writing workshop. So your 10 taglines with your 10 rationales are going to be due on Friday. Then you're going to come back to the discussion board by Sunday and respond to 3 of your classmates by explaining why 3 of their taglines work and 3 of their taglines that don't work, using strong rationale backed up with research to support your arguments. Okay, if you're watching this on the archive and you have any questions about anything I covered here, feel free to reach out to me through the FSO platform, call me during office hours, make a one-on-one go-to appointment. We can do this live and in person if you like. It's really important, this is a very busy week, that you stay on task, because next week the class wraps up and then you go straight into month 5, which is the design research class, and it only gets busier as you move through the program. So unless you want to spend the next 8 months running up a hill of sand, which is exhausting, I suggest you work on your time management and make sure everything is evenly spaced out in the week so that you can have time to work on everything and turn in your best work. Okay, so be in touch if you have any questions. If you're struggling with research for the paper, you need some clarification on the testimonial ads, or you're struggling with the taglines, please reach out to me. I'd rather have you ask me a million questions than try to fake it and make it on your own, and then you have to redo the assignment. Okay, good luck everybody. I will talk to you next week.